Over here at SIFTech, we've been looking into, well, more lucrative ventures than merely our traditional unmanned launch system. As such, recently we've been looking into crew recovery for other corporations, and have invested heavily in airship technology. This particular example, an old favourite, is the redoubtable crew recovery airship Mark 1 Star. It just flows off the tongue nicely there. This vehicle is capable of recovering Kerbals for up to a third of Kerbin's circumference around, and transporting them what we are informed by our legal experts is relative safety all the way back quite happily. But what of Kerbals who have plummeted from orbit from far too far away, or perhaps need urgent rescue or are halfway around the world? Well, fear not, for we have done further research. And are now quite proud to unveil the world's first, and hopefully not last, HyperBlimp. Well, as yet we are unable to reach Mach 5 with it. We can happily reach at least Mach 3.5 without suffering any major complications, as we now intend to demonstrate. The HyperBlimp Mark 1 Star is a further development of the previously existing Mark 1, which suffered a minor problem during its construction phase when it was discovered that four of its 6 engines occupied the same physical space. Unfortunately, we couldn't get decent insurance given the fact our spaceship was no longer spatially sound, and suffered numerous anomalies owing to that. Still, fortunately, the Mark 1 Star now only occupies its own physical space rather than extending into the 12th dimension, which honestly we consider to be a major plus. Apparently we're getting a long loading break here. I'm guessing Fraps and Kerbals floating around at the same time are an unhappy situation. Regardless, we appear to have arrived, or be in the process of arriving. Excellent. Here's our 2 crew members. At the moment, of course, the ship is not designed to carry passengers. At the moment, we're just simply running proof of concept. Now, in order to demonstrate we do in fact here have a blimp, or at least a dirigible lighter than aircraft, rather than an aeroplane, we must now, of course, demonstrate it has the ability to float. So, activate our altitude control, and clear the runway. And we are floating. Unfortunately, it's a little front heavy, so a bit of alacrity on the controls is required. We now pass Bob Kerman and the previous HyperBlimp one. As you can see, minor structural problems there, but the craft remains completely intact. Most of the craft remains completely intact. Now, I'm afraid I can't guarantee thrilling commentary through the run-up phase of the flight, and chances are in post-production I'll add some pleasant music in this section. We're currently using a reliable SAS system mounted in the cockpit. We're currently using a very flat cockpit, not because of any aerodynamic properties, because I think frankly we can write those off given the front of the aircraft. It is composed almost entirely of a solid flat face. Instead, we're relying almost entirely on physical strength, and a convenient connection port enabling us to add yet another air intake. So the one thing we've learned from previous flights is that you can never ever have enough air going into your engines. We're heading mostly south for this flight. No particular reason beyond the fact it's actually just a complete nightmare to turn this thing, as you may expect. It's a lovely summer's morning though. Due south, probably due east in fact. Whichever direction this is. Due whatever direction the airfield points in. We see our own little blue ocean planet in the skies above the world. A powerful recognition that stirs within us. Of course, owing to the nature of the turbojet engines that are currently fitted to the vehicle, we are only realistically going to be able to get to high speeds beyond around 10 to 15 kilometers in altitude. We have, however, just beaten the sound barrier like the red-headed stepchild in a blimp. Well, I suppose it's a dirigible rather than the blimp. I can go, because currently most of our lift is being provided by the wings, hence the reason I installed them. So, funnily enough, travelling at remarkably high speeds, your dirigible gas bags not particularly useful. They do, however, generate a truly spectacular amount of drag, hence the necessity for four jet engines on a lighter-than aircraft. Admittedly, a not very lighter-than aircraft. Okay, approaching Mach 2. I'm going to level out this a bit. Yep, and now we've just passed 15k. As you can see, the speedo has just gone utterly ballistic. We've just passed Mach 2. We're getting a bit of shock heating, so it might be best to pull up a bit. Yeah, this happens, it's fine. As I said, the craft is not particularly aerodynamic. So we're just going to pull up a bit and hopefully get over the 20k barrier. Because in the sound barrier is right now a very distant memory. Engines now take on a glorious golden colour. The front of the craft is now a delightful rose, I think. I really don't build them like I used to. Good thing for this thing with hydrogen this time. Our previous experience tells us around 25 kilometers appears to be the rough altitude limit for one of these aircraft before the engines suffer a critical out-of-oxygen failure. So I think a nice stable 20k should do 20-ish k should do us nicely. The art is, of course, getting a nice stable 20k. Now travelling around Mach 3.5, and they said that the HyperBlimp was a really bad idea. It is, don't get me wrong, it's a terrible idea. Should we are slowing down slightly, let's crank the speed up and aim up a bit. We're just going for a speed run here. I honestly don't care if we suffer minor problems with our test pilots. They should be used to this by now. So we can break the 1300 meters per second barrier, bring us to around Mach 3.8. So our air coming into our jets, that's a good sign. Okay, as you can hear, we're now suffering slightly. Well, we've got a fair distance. Not entirely shabby, I don't think. The next version of this craft will, of course, have a GPS system on it, so I can actually find out where the craft has gone exactly. And hopefully to keep in touch with the mapping satellite we have recently launched to find out where Kerbin is. Currently, the mapping satellite has indicated that Kerbin is in fact spherical, though there are still some holdouts in the science community who believe it may in fact be toroidal, and have yet to find any evidence otherwise, as the current mapsat is not in a polar orbit. And therefore, the gap in the top of the data could be construed as evidence of a gigantic hole connecting the two poles. And we are now plummeting from the sky. Raven, pull up. We still have 19 kilometers to go, and the aircraft is lighter than air. There really isn't anything to worry about in terms of crashing, unless we were to slam into a mountainside. And unless Olympus Mons has grown spontaneously on Kerbin, we should be okay there as well. Let's have a look from our pilot's seat. Yes, it's mostly fire and a little bit of ground. Excellent. So view from the back seat like it's the back of Rabin's head. And more fire. We'll be considered as the flight of a lifetime. Now, of course, the question is, how do we land a HyperBlimp? To which the honest answer is, I have absolutely no idea. Step 1 would probably involve decelerating, and frankly, that isn't an option at the moment. See, it's really no point in attempting maneuver at this speed and altitude, especially when flying what is essentially a hypersonic blimp. Okay, last gasp. We're at 21 kilometers high. Let's see if we can break 1300 by logically pointing up. Come on, engines. We just need a little bit more efficiency. Any second now. We're just going to get a single bit more of engine power out of it. Any second. There we go. Unfortunately, the point where you get maximum speed is roughly also the point at which the aircraft begins to suffer critical out-of-oxygen failures. As we can see, vastly more efficient than the existing forms of airship. The current crew recovery airship has reached the lighter version reached a top speed of just over 200 miles an hour. This one goes literally an order of magnitude faster. Although, as yet, it's slightly less accurate when it comes to actually finding people. More's the pity. The other main reason we have to accelerate this craft as fast as possible is when those engines burn out, it is utterly spectacular. So we're now past the peninsula. Now heading well over the ocean. 1280. 83, 1284, we're losing shock heating, we're also losing quite a lot of atmosphere. 1290. 98, 99, 1300, we have passed 1300 meters per second. Now at Mach 3.8, and everything's looking a little bit unstable. I have no idea whether we're going to be able to reach Mach 4, nor indeed what that translates to. Yep, I think we've lost this one now. We seem to have lost the fight. Oh well. Full power. Full low power. Oh, the smoke trails, we gained smoke trails on the engines again, and they previously disappeared at maximum speed. In terms of how to drag this aircraft generates, now we've passed our previous attempt for a speed barrier. Let's turn the engines off and see how long it takes to slow down. That's right, we're getting measurable G-force when it comes to slowing down. Of course, at the moment we are well outside of the atmosphere. Well, we're well outside of dense atmosphere, so the airbags are functionally useless. However, we still have more than 3/4 of our fuel left, and have happily gone ooh, a good sixth of the way around the planet. We're not quite going to get a circumnavigation with the HyperBlimp, but I think we can get pretty close. And even more if we glide. So as you can see here, the violent deceleration, we've only dropped a kilometre, we've lost over 400 meters per second of forward speed. This thing really, really is not aerodynamic. It's like trying to lift a brick. Anyway, I can't promise you a crash, because again, this is a lighter than aircraft, and once I get to about 5 kilometers, we'll in fact casually start floating again. So we'll probably call an end to this demonstration video right now. Hopefully, in the future we'll be able to create faster, more efficient blimps, enabling us to pick up crewmen and charge exorbitant sums for their release from anywhere across Kerbin, and perhaps even late in the future, Eve. Maybe even Duna. Lathe. As long as I can somehow bolt a rocket to the back of one of these and launch into space, we can go anywhere with an atmosphere.